Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, President, Dale Carnegie Tokyo Training. My special guest today, fellow Aussie, Grant Torrens, who's the Managing Director for Hayes Japan. Grant, welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, well,
Great to
Grant,
speak to you.
you've had a long career with Hayes. Actually, we had a chat the other day. But just sort of walk us back through your career a little bit. Give us some of the background and how you wound up in Japan. So how did that work out?
Sure. Okay. So Hayes is a global recruitment business, and I joined the Hayes company quite by accident, really. And I think if you talk to a lot of recruiters, they probably share the same story that they fell into recruitment.
Right.
So I'm Australian, as you mentioned. I finished university. Did a couple of years working in Brisbane in an unrelated field. I was doing commodity trading. But then, like most young Australians, I kind of had that yearn to go and try to apply my trade in other countries. And like most other Australians, London is the one that sort of seems to call out to you. Although, funny enough, Japan was a country that particularly interested me. I studied the language through junior high school and university, and I was really interested in the culture. And I'd come here a couple of times when I was younger. So part of me really wanted to go to Japan, funny enough. But in the end, because of visas and things like that, language, London was my destination. So I went to London, didn't have a job, heard about Hayes. Their expertise is to find people jobs. So I did what most people do, which is send my CV in and say, hey, can you help me find a job? Maybe similar to what I was doing in Brisbane, Australia. And they gave me a call and said, well, look, if you're interested, you might be suitable for our graduate program. Why don't you come down and have a chat to the directors, and we'll talk to you more about the world of recruitment and what we do for our customers. And I had no idea about what recruitment was, to be honest with you. It wasn't something that I'd had much exposure to previously in Australia. I was aware, obviously, of what a recruitment business did, but I didn't know how important they were to...
How many years ago is this now?
Well, this was now 20 years ago. So this was back in 2006. I really, mainly because I was out of options. I'd been in London unemployed now for about 3 months.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So how to get a job?
Yeah, it was. I think back then the economy was strong. Actually, I think London was a pretty highly sought after destination, particularly for Australians, because the pound was so strong at that point. So I don't think candidates and talent was a problem for companies. So it wasn't that easy to find a job, to be honest, particularly for a graduate from a non-UK or European institution with no experience. So I was quite fortunate and quite happy actually to be offered the position to come and join Hayes as a graduate, as an associate consultant, what we call our graduates. And so that was a really eye-opening experience. And it was a bit of a baptism of fire, really, because my desk that I was responsible for recruiting in was hedge funds in London. So not the easiest client sometimes, but amazing. It was such a great eye-opening experience to the world of the city, the financial services sector. Obviously, London being one of two or perhaps the biggest financial services hub in the world. So to be working with clients who were so ingrained in that industry I thought was a really valuable opportunity.
And also, I mean, if you think about the way that business works, it's related to the amount of salary that people are going to earn in the placement. And so, proportionately, I imagine the numbers for the finance business are fairly high. So the financial rewards for someone who's in that particular segment not going to be too bad as well. So you start making success, you're getting well paid. It's going to be like, oh, I like this.
Yeah.
Keep going type of thing, I suppose.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think if you go, this is back before GFC times, this is 2006. So the financial services sector was very much heavily stacked towards performance-based bonuses as well. And bonuses for particularly hedge fund employees could be quite substantial. I mean, I'm sure they still are, but back then, before GFC, they were quite substantial. So being able to tap into that and help candidates negotiate those types of packages. I think the other thing as well is that if I think about my journey since then, which I'm sure we'll come on to, working in the financial services sector in London really was a great starting point to then transfer my skills into other countries. I have taken advantage of working for a large firm like Hayes that does have international presence. But the sector that I recruited for in London is pretty much identical to financial services sector in Singapore. So being able to transfer from London to Singapore, which is what I eventually did, was pretty straightforward, to be honest. Not only were the clients the same, the banks in London also have a presence in Singapore and so on. Some of the people were the same as well. Some of my clients in London had gone to Singapore before me, and when I ended up transferring there, it was almost like nothing had changed apart from country.
Why Singapore? I presume Hayes operating in Japan by that time, and you had that studied Japanese from junior high school.
Yeah, that's
onwards.
right. Yeah.
Was there a thought that, okay, if I'm going to leave London, maybe I'll go to Tokyo now? I'm sort of thought that before. I'll go, but you actually went to Singapore. So why Singapore?
Yeah, it's funny. I think up until now, obviously, because I'm here in Tokyo, not living and working and really experiencing Japan was always something in the back of my mind. If I didn't take this opportunity to do what I'm doing now, I think it would always be something that I would look back on at the end of my career as a regret. So to answer your point, yes, that was always in the back of my mind. Once I leave London, would go into Japan be an opportunity for me. But how I ended up in Singapore was not straightforward either. So I didn't intend to leave London, actually. We'd gone through the GFC, which was obviously quite devastating for all financial services firms, as well as the vendors and suppliers that feed into that, including recruitment. But I got through that.
You survived.
I survived, yeah. I got through it. I mean, that is... I think a lesson in how to, the importance of pivoting your approach to business. If one sector is completely wiped out, where can you look to? But I kind of got through that, and that had gone on for about 18 months. And then the industry started to recover, and our team had started to recover, and we started to grow the team again. And at that point, I decided I'll take some time off, which I was able to do at that point in our business in London. My plan was to take a few months off and just go and experience Asia. So from a backpacking perspective. So my plan was flying.
Sounds like you were single at this time.
I was, and no children, which is probably a key point to add. Yeah, exactly. So it was quite easy, and I was going back to Australia anyway for Christmas, and I planned to be in Australia for quite some time, for like weeks. So I decided to take a bit of a career break and bolt on a few more months. And after my Christmas trip to Australia, go to Thailand and spend some time backpacking around Thailand, Laos, Cambodia. I spent some time in Cambodia helping to build houses in a remote village there, which was a great experience. And the plan was to finish doing all of that, Vietnam as well, and then go back to London and pick up where I left off. But throughout that journey, I stumbled across Singapore. And to be honest with you, I didn't know much about Singapore. I think my parents had been there back in the 1990s, but I hadn't heard much about it. So it was always a really sort of foreign destination to me that I'd never really considered living and working in. But I had some colleagues that I worked with in London who now worked in Singapore, and they found out I was traveling in Asia. I wasn't that far away. I think I was in Malaysia when they reached out to me and said, hey, why don't you come to Singapore? We'll show you around, introduce you to the business, and who knows, perhaps you might consider staying here with us. So I did that. I went to Singapore for 4 days. Completely blew my budget out. I was operating on a $10 a day budget. Yeah, exactly. I went from sleeping on the beach to even the cheapest hostel in Singapore was not very cheap. But I'm glad I did it because I went there. I got a really, really good idea about Singapore. I'll be honest with you. It surprised me that it was the main language spoken there from a business perspective was English. I didn't realize that before I went there. So I was up for a change. I think I'd been in London for about 4.5 years by this point. Singapore represented a really easy transition into Asia, to be honest with you. English speaking country, same company. They had an opportunity for me, and the industry that I was going to be recruiting for was an industry that I was already really familiar with. So I think
quite well established in Singapore as well, as you you said, all the major banks are there, and
Yeah.
major companies, funds or whatever there too. So
Yeah, exactly. And Hayes is a well-known brand there as well. So it was less so of a choice between, Singapore and Tokyo. It was more a case of Singapore is an opportunity that's being presented to me. And it's
has the company ever supportive to lose you in London to have you, turn up in Singapore? Though,
Yeah.
supportively?
But really, I mean, that's a great thing about working for our business here, Hayes, globally. Internal moves is quite common. Internal mobility is quite common. In Japan, we don't only have people relocating between sort of Osaka, where we have a presence, in Tokyo and Yokohama, but we're an export of talent to Australia, the UK, Canada. We've had some people go to. We've taken people from other countries as well, and our global leadership team, our CEO, they're really pragmatic about promoting the benefits of internal mobility. So I think we do that quite well in our business.
And so at this point, you're working in Singapore for how many years before you get a chance to come to Japan?
A long time, about 11 years.
11 years, right?
And yeah, sort of a bit of a caveat there, 11 plus 1.5, because there was a moment there which I shared with you when we caught up where I've been offered the job to come to Japan, but before I could get the visa, the door came down.
I was at home. Everything remote, right?
Exactly, yeah. So I was part of the Japan business for about 15 months, but in Singapore.
That just sounds absolutely diabolical to me. If you're part of the Japan business, you're based in Singapore, and you can't go and see anybody because you couldn't even get in and out of Japan very easily for quite some time.
Yeah.
So I think doing it the hard way.
Yeah. If you were to do it now, it'd be a different story, I think, because video conferencing and remote-based working is so ingrained in the work culture these days. But if you go back to that first year of COVID, that was all fairly new technology, unreliable technology as well. I mean, if you go back to December 2019, most businesses, and I think including ours, the idea of remote-based working being ingrained in a working week, you would think we're light years away from that, particularly from an infrastructure point of view.
Well, also December, 2019, you started to hear about this virus, which in Japan, we all said, Asian flu. We didn't get that last time. We're not going to get it this time. We're good. But we weren't good. And I don't know about Singapore, how they thought about it, but there was that sort of maybe naivete that this is not really going to impact anyway. But I remember some guy put something up on social media. He'd just taken one of the flight paths out of Shanghai to where those flights go. And he said, this is a spread of this virus globally. And he was totally 100% right.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened, So it was hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Singapore had experiences before and was quite cognizant of the threat of a virus like that. I mean, with SARS, for example, and other sort of epidemics that had happened in the region. So there was definitely some alarm, I think, and probably not in December or January 2020, but I think certainly by February, I think there was a sense of heightened alert in Singapore, and obviously it is a destination for a lot of Chinese tourists in Singapore, particularly the southern island of Sentosa. And in fact, that's actually where they ended up pinpointing the initial infection entering Singapore was on the island, but no, I mean, Singapore shut down really, really quickly. The government came in with pretty strong laws around separation, not getting too close, working from home. There was no office-based working at all. So yeah, I mean, that threw a lot of businesses, including ours, into disarray because, as I said, prior to that, remote-based working and I mean, I'm not saying that we were completely foreign to telecoms. Video conferencing, for example, but to be honest, all of my calls up to that point with my bosses, with my peers around Asia, had all been phone based. Even our board meeting calls were.
You used to have that big UFO thing on the table. Remember?
That's it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so my 15 months of running our business here in Japan, but remotely from Singapore, I mean, I look back and I think to myself, that was definitely one of the most challenging periods that I've had. But at the same time, I think it really was one of the most rewarding experiences, because it was almost, I wouldn't say I was pioneering, but
That's a good point. I mean, how did you approach it? Because there's no rule book, there's no guide, no map on this sort of stuff, as you say, and suddenly you're plonked down in one country, you're running an operation in another country, you've not lived and worked in the other country yet, visited, but not lived and worked. And so it's very, when you say remote, it's the remote with a capital R. So how did you approach that? What were your thoughts around, okay, I'm stuck here in Singapore, I'm not going anywhere, I don't know when I can get out of here either. So how do I plan for this? What was your thinking about that?
yeah, I mean, there was a couple of key things that went in my favor. One was I had a really supportive boss at that point, who he was based in Singapore as well. So he ran our Asia business. He was based in Singapore. I had a good relationship with him. He was incredibly supportive, and we would often catch up and discuss the current situation, because we didn't know. I could be leaving Singapore in a month. I could be leaving Singapore in 3 years. And he was very good at, I wouldn't say necessarily calming me down, but giving me assurances and security that, you're doing a good job. We know that the situation is a bit ambiguous, but you've got our support. I've got his support, and so on. The second thing that went in my favor is I've got a really strong management team here in Japan, and continue to do so. And I was able to link up with them quite regularly. I was doing daily calls with the leadership team here, and I mean, they're great, and they're really strong, and without them, I think it could have been a much tougher task as well. But that aside, I think some of the things I had to do myself to allow the situation to be successful, first of all, was create data systems. So at that point in time, the data that I was able to pull from the business was quite raw. I'd call it data as opposed to information.
Now, is this in the particular case for Japan, or is this across the globe? The data systems hadn't got to a very sophisticated level yet, or is this just a Japan problem?
I think mainly Japan. Right. So I mean, the data is always there. I mean, we're very, as a sales business, we are very good on collecting data and storing the data and so on. But I think in terms of being able to pull that data out and gather insights and trends, I think prior to COVID, that was something that could definitely have been improved. I look at it now and I think we're probably industry leading in terms of the insights that we have created, and we've obviously tapped into some of the AI tools now that are available to help you do that. But prior to that, and when I was working remotely, there was things that I could do myself to be able to help me turn the raw data into actionable insights that was going to allow me to get a very clear understanding as to what's working in Japan, what's not working in Japan, which I could see myself without having to physically be here. And one of the things I did actually during COVID was spend a lot of time teaching myself around Excel, how to use Excel properly, I think I went from being a very beginner when it comes to Excel knowledge to being quite advanced after about 3 months. And I think the benefit of COVID and working from home was that you maybe had a bit more time to teach yourself about those types of things. And I think using Excel, which might seem quite primitive now because of all the AI tools that we have and things like Power BI and other insights, you'd look at Excel and go, well, that's quite primitive. But back then, that was a tool that we had. And you couldn't really rely on someone else to produce the insights for you. You kind of had to take that on yourself. And that was something that I did. So I threw a lot of time and effort into teaching myself how to become quite proficient at Excel, then take the raw data, put it into the models that I'd created. And that gave me a lot of clarity then around what was happening in Japan, which I think really then helped conversations with people on video conferencing be very clear and quite useful as well.
A bit more pointed.
Yeah.
One of the problems with data, as you say, salespeople, generally speaking, absolutely hate admin, hate putting stuff into databases.
Yeah.
They want to spend their time talking to clients or talking to candidates where the money lies, So for any organization, getting people to actually put the stuff in that's useful That's not easy. And what do you guys found works well to actually make that happen?
Yeah, it is. It's conflicting, right? Because even as leaders, we want our salespeople to be freed up from all of the administration burden and going out there and doing what we want them to do, which is to sell and to get close to clients and understand clients better. So the argument is there that, well, if you're sitting there and you're inputting all the details of your phone calls and this and that into the system, is that the best use of their time? But on the flip side, well, data is integral to running the business, right? I mean, you need to be able to see the data to understand where should we put our investment, where should we put our time, and so on. So you are right. I mean, I don't think there's ever going to be an end to the journey of getting consultants or getting salespeople to put data on the system. But along the way, there are things that we have done, and I think companies can do to make that process a bit better. I think the first thing was, you're always sort of selling the what's in it for them. It's the old sort of sales motto, what's in it for me, right? And shifting the mindset from, this is not a kind of policing or compliance sort of tool. I think sometimes salespeople would look at their CRM system as a bit of a policing tool, right? You want me to put data on the system because you want to make sure that I'm working hard enough. And that's just simply not the case. And I think shifting that mindset towards, no, this is not policing, this is insights, and here's how you're going to be able to extract the data that you put in to give you a better understanding about where are you getting the most return on your time, where are you getting no return on your time, how can you improve your own performance by making slight adjustments in order to, and you're selling the benefits back to them as to, you put a little bit more in the system, you're going to be able to get a lot more out of the system. But that said, also there are tools in place now, there are tools out on the market that almost allow data to be input into a system without any human interaction at all. So there is sort of tools that listen into conversations. So if you and I are having a conversation, there are tools that would listen to that and then take out the right bits of information and input it into a CRM system or any kind of system into the right categories.
Is there any issue here around privacy with that? Because a client, for example, how do they feel about their conversation being recorded? Are they even aware it's been?
They're absolutely aware. Yeah, I mean, you'd need to explicitly get permission, and it's like when you're calling up a bank, for instance, and they always say, we're monitoring this
Control or something.
No, we're not doing that. We're not sort of pushing play on a button and the client's getting the message to say we're recording this conversation. But in a lot of cases, clients appreciate it because they want you to be invested in the conversation. They don't want you sort of sitting there writing down everything that they're saying, and you're focusing more on what you're writing and less on, and you might be missing key parts of that. I mean, most of our customers would like the fact that you can be fully present in the conversation, fully engaged in the conversation, and all the important parts that's going to help us find the talent that they want or find the job that they want is going to be extracted from that conversation. But absolutely, from a privacy point of view, everyone is, if there's any kind of recording being taking place, both parties are completely aware of that.
And what about when you actually made the move, finally got out of Singapore and came here? Now you'd had 15 months of remote, so you've been working daily basis with the team here, but remote. But you're on the ground now. What was your planning? What was your thinking about? Okay, I'm going to be on the ground. Here's my roadmap. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. How did you think about that? How did you approach that? Because you had to get not just the top leadership level or the direct reports, but everyone behind you, and probably the vast majority of the team probably had very little interaction with you prior to you getting here physically, but now you're here physically. So what did you do to get the whole team behind you to follow your lead?
Sure. Well, I think that 15 months period I was working remotely, I didn't know it at the time because I wasn't that familiar with its sort of Japanese culture and ways of working. But obviously, the concept of sort of nemawashi, so going around the routes and getting collective decision making in play. That opportunity to work remotely really was the best foundation to create a strategy moving forwards that involved everyone, because you're not physically here to gather all the data, see things through your own eyes. So you are pretty reliant on getting anecdotal feedback from various people around the business. And those conversations I had wasn't only just with sort of senior level leaders. I also did a lot of conversations with junior managers, but also consultants as well, to get a really good understanding about what are we doing now that's working, what are we doing, what are we not doing now that we probably should be doing, and what are we doing where we can probably get some improvements along the way.
And how did that work? Because in I think particularly with Japanese staff, more so I'm going to say than maybe Western staff, management by wandering around, was a very famous phrase. It came out,
Like Gemba walking and that sort of thing, or
well, it was from a book, In Search of Excellence, and it was a concept from America. One of the guys used to be a McKinsey and wrote a book about it, and that became something where you would wander around as a boss and talk to people, which at that time was something quite radical, because you were sort of in your corner suite with very thick pile carpet and quiet, everything way up there, dealing with direct reports. You don't really meet people on the floor. So that was a new thing in the States, and that sort of then spread around everywhere else. And so, but in Japan, again, it was very hierarchical. Bosses are at the top floor, thick pile carpet, very quiet, direct reports, don't really talk to people down the bottom.
right.
So for Japanese leaders to have their boss go under them, direct to their subordinates, I've heard this, quite scary. Oh, why? Why are you doing that? What did they say about me? What did they say about me?
Yeah.
Or asking them, what did they ask you? Paranoid. And so not potentially positive about the idea at all. So leader, the question is, how did you deal with that? Because maybe Hayes has become westernized enough, or maybe that concept wasn't an issue. But for a lot of companies, even still probably, that's probably an issue. So how do you actually make that happen without upsetting the apple cart or making people feel paranoid and scared about what's going on?
Sure. Yeah. No, and you're right. I think from a Hayes global cultural perspective, the concept of second level meetings and that sort of thing is quite common in our business, particularly in the Asia region. Again, my boss at the time, he enjoyed doing that. He'd like to have one-on-ones with me in Singapore, but then at the same time, he made it quite clear that he was also interested in speaking to levels down as well. But I think so. When I came in from Japan, that was not like I wasn't groundbreaking anything. That was already a concept that was understood, and whether people liked it or not, it would be a different matter. But it was not such a shock to see a managing director want to engage and speak to other people. But I do remember the way that I always handled it was similar to how it was handled to me, which was expressly asking for permission. So giving the senior level managers an understanding as to why I want to be able to have conversations with people throughout the business. It's not because I'm trying to second guess what you're saying or because I don't trust you or whatever, but I have an interest in understanding everyone, who they are, why they're working for us, maybe some trends and some challenges that I'm not specifically interested in who's saying what about who, but I'm trying to get understanding about, is there a common theme here that's coming out from various layers of the business, which would mean that we could benefit in collectively coming together and thinking about some ideas to improve that.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Leading is easy. Getting people to follow is the hard part. That is a great quote from Yogi Berra. Surprisingly, despite the complexities of leading here in Japan, everyone has to work it out by themselves. Foreign leaders want practical, applicable, expert advice. This is now available for the first time in history. Grab your copy of Japan Leadership Mastery on Amazon today and avoid the mystery, trial and error, especially the errors.
I don't think, thinking back over the last sort of 5 years that I've been in charge of the Japan business or managing director here, I don't remember a time where anyone was upset or didn't want me to do that. So and it has been incredibly useful. I think being able to sit down with our associate consultants to understand how is our onboarding, how are our training, how is our management style, the communication. Obviously, we have many different cultures and different people who speak different languages in our business. So, do they feel included? Those types of things. I think most of my managers would be appreciative to get another viewpoint on that, because obviously at the end of the day, we all want to make sure that we're doing the right things by our company and the people that work for us.
Well, that book by Tom Peters, and I think it was Dennis Waterman, it became a bestseller. It launched Tom Peters' career as a speaker, as a guru, and that spread far and wide. So probably by the time that was I think I came across that book in the late 1980s,
Okay.
maybe early 90s, and so probably by the time you joined the firm, it had sort of permeated around the globe as an idea, and everyone started to do it. What about getting ideas from people? Because, with your experience, you're London, Singapore, growing up in Australia, you've got many ideas naturally coming from having a very diverse background relative to people who are here. Plus you're plugged into the organization at the top, so you get all the information. And so again, we're getting ideas, but what about getting ideas from below? What have you found works well to get ideas that bottom up?
Yeah, I mean, it can be more challenging in Japan.
Why is that?
Well, generally speaking, I wouldn't want to give the impression that this relates to sort of everyone, but generally speaking, I think in Japan, the culture here, there's a couple of things. One is communication here is more high context than I would say where I was used to maybe in Australia or in the UK. There's a lot of reading between the lines that's required. I think it's quite famous in Japan. There's that concept of maybe we won't say no, all right? So we'll say other things like let us think about it, or it sounds like a good idea. We'll sort of come back to you, but there's maybe a reluctance to give a flat out no. Whereas in Australia and in the UK, I think the communication there tends to be sort of more lower context. It's very explicit.
Where does Singapore fit into that?
It's to be honest with you, Singapore is more of a Western-based sort of lower context communication style, and I think so you have to be understanding of that. And I think even with communication coming from senior leadership down to the business. You have to be really careful about how you say that and what you're saying, because when I was in London, for instance, the communication there was very direct, very explicit. There was under no circumstances were you ever confused as to what your leaders thought about things. But also, I think you get so used to it that it almost becomes almost like a term of endearment. If a manager bluntly tells you that you're not doing well or that you need to improve something, to be honest with you, I remember thinking to myself, well, this manager cares about me. He cares enough, or she cares enough to...
Very broad-minded, or you?
But that wasn't just me either. It was, to be honest with you, if your manager was not giving you direct, blunt feedback, I think a lot of people, when I was working in London, that would worry them. You'd almost get the impression that is my manager kind of giving up on me or no longer interested in it.
Doesn't care.
No, exactly. But I mean, I wouldn't say getting a dressing down, but having blunt criticism. They call it constructive criticism, right? And you walk away from that going, I actually really appreciate that. I think that's giving me something to think about, and I want to improve. I think in general in Japan, that kind of communication, it would not have the same impact. I think
they have an impact, all right, but not
it's positive. Exactly. I don't think addressing issues, negative issues, bluntly, would, generally speaking, cause the person on the other end to walk away feeling good and thinking my manager's invested in me.
Interestingly enough, in Japan, I found that because you have a strong security of employee here, when people don't perform, they don't feel any particular pressure about that. And if they get some constructive criticism or feedback on their performance, they're likely to say, oh, I give up, I can't do it, and just walk away from the problem, as opposed to be accountable for it, because they know they're not going to get fired, because under the law here, incompetence is not a legitimate reason to sack somebody, as you know. So like the sort of downside for not performing here is pretty marginal, really. So that's what makes Japan with Japanese staff, I think, a bit interesting. And I've experienced that where I've given some sturdy feedback, and the person on the other end is like, well, I can't do it. I give up. Get someone else to do it. And that's like shocking. Like, what do you mean get someone else to do it? It's your job, So I've had to, again, change my communication of what I want to say here, so I don't get that I give up, walk away, no accountability, no responsibility approach. So yeah, I found that a bit.
And from your point of view, would you is that a cultural thing in terms of Japan, or is that a generational thing?
I think that's a Japan thing.
I mean, our business here, we definitely, I mean, we're meritocracy based, and that brings its own challenges. But people join us because they like the fact that we are an international company. And whilst we absolutely respect local norms, some of the areas that we are more akin to our international or London-based colleagues would be around the career development and the meritocratic nature of our career development. So we are performance based. We are absolutely governed by outcomes. I would call, I mean, I think pressure's good. I think pressure and stress can't be conflicted. I think stress is bad, but pressure is kind of what gets you out of bed in the morning and gives you the impetus to improve, that whole kind of Kaizen mindset. So we, as a sales business, as a recruitment business, we are very much outcome based, performance based. And if you can deliver on that and achieve that, then you enjoy all the trappings that come with a meritocratic organization. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's common, but the chances aren't zero that one day you could be managed by someone that was more junior than you once upon a time. And so I'm proud of that organizational culture that we have. So the experience that you mentioned before, I don't see it myself here in this business, but I know, obviously I've been in Japan long enough to know that within the domestic organizations for a long time, there has been that kind of job for life mentality, and maybe career progression is achieved more from tenure based rather than merit based. But I know it's changing though. It is changing a lot, right?
The flip side though is there's so much demand for people, as you know, that if someone gives you any sort of pressure, you can say, well, okay, screw it, I quit. And I know I can get another job. Whereas, 15 years ago, you wouldn't do that because you're not sure you could get another job. But today, again, no.
Yeah.
I give up. I give up. I give up on you. I give up on the company. I'll get another job somewhere else. Bye.
Yeah.
So again, it's it's morphed into another angle, but the problem can potentially still be there. But anyway.
Yeah, but I think on your point with regards to the dismissal laws in Japan, I mean, they are incredibly tough. And when you look at it, I mean, it is good to an extent because job security and ensuring that people are treated fairly is important. And I know the irony of a recruitment managing director sort of arguing against the strictness of dismissal laws, but if you think about some of the stats that you see coming out of the economy, in terms of bankruptcies in Japan, I mean, I think last year the amount of companies that went bankrupt was an all-time high. The companies that cited bankruptcy for the single reason that they couldn't find the talent they need to continue on, well, that rose by 80%. So there is we know there's a blockage there in terms of being able to attract talent in Japan for a variety of reasons. And I do wonder if the very strict dismissal laws here play a part in that. Two reasons. One is the talent that would normally be funneling out of organizations, big organizations that have been well established and have thousands of people, channeling into startup firms that really need the people, really need that kind of innovative spirit, but they can't get that because there's that sort of lifetime mentality thing.
Yeah.
But the other aspect to it as well is investment into automation and process improvement. I mean, I wonder what would be the appetite to invest millions and millions of dollars into automation without the ability then to realize some of those cost savings. So I think something, my personal opinion is that dismissal laws in Japan need to be looked at some point. I know from time to time there is discussions at governmental level about that, but they don't go anywhere very quickly.
Well, it's in the hands of the courts and the judges, so the government doesn't have that much direct control over, I suppose. But thinking about trust, though, trust is important everywhere. But somehow I think in Japan it's even more important, and so you'll meet people who have quit companies, you're doing, interviews at quit companies. Why did you leave? Well, my senpai called me to go to his company, and then his company goes bust. He's now back on the job market. And you think about that, wow, that's an amazing amount of trust involved there to quit your company because your senpai's calling you to go to a new company. And then eventually at that stage, for a lot of these people, older people, once they get off the regular wheel, they're out of the context of getting mid-career high, getting back in. Today it's different. But if you go back, 10, 15 years, that was, once you went off the main road, very hard to get back on it. So anyway, what have you found has worked well for you to build trust with people?
Sure. Yeah, on that senpai concept, it's very strong in Japan, isn't it? I mean, my wife is half Japanese actually, and I was talking to her about this concept of senpai, because you're absolutely right. People, the pull to follow your senpai into an unknown world is very strong. And she mentioned to me that she believes it dates right back to school, where school children, it's really strongly ingrained in them to not only respect teachers but also respect the elder students as well, and quite quickly when they're in sort of junior school, they are assigned a sort of senpai students, an older student who, I think once that's so ingrained into their life that when they go into the workplace, it kind of follows suit. And they've spent so much time having a senpai student to look up to that suddenly they're in the workplace. There's another senpai now that they look up to. But trust. I mean, I think trust is absolutely vital. Obviously, the saying goes, it's really hard to get someone to trust you, but incredibly easy to lose it. And I think it doesn't matter whether that's Australia or London or Singapore or Japan. It rings true for every organization. I think in Japan, the challenge with gaining trust is to be really conscious of what we talked about before, in that communication here is quite high context. And I think there's also that concept I'd mentioned around nemowashi, ensuring that there's harmony in decision making, ensure that as many people as possible are involved in decision making. And from a Westerner point of view, that's quite foreign. I think we like to make decisions quickly. We like to get the minimum amount of information that makes us comfortable that we are making the right decision, and then make it. And of course, there's always benefits in having a robust discussion and bringing in other ideas and having those conversations. But ultimately, as a leader, you're making the decision, and you make it relatively quickly. And in Japan, it's different. Speed comes second to the sort of harmonious process of reaching that decision. I think that leads into trust quite a lot as well. If you come in to a Japan business or an international business in Japan, and you start making decisions as though you're in central London, for instance, I think very quickly then you've eroded the foundation that you need to be able to start building trust with your business. But after that, it's really the stock standard things that you would be expecting of any leader who's trying to gain trust within that business. Reciprocating that trust. It's very hard to get trust from other people if you don't trust them yourselves. Being fair, pragmatic, impartial. I would say other things are doing what you say you would do. I think from a leader's perspective, sometimes yeah. But you're walking around on the floor and you're meeting people for the first time and they're telling you their problems and you're saying what you will do to solve that. It's very easy then to walk away and they don't hear from you ever again. And if that's the case, you've lost their trust. So I think it's really important that if you're going to do a gamble walk and you're going to listen to people's concerns and challenges and you're making promises, you have to front up and deliver on those promises. But I think communication as well. Communication is absolutely vital. I don't think you could over communicate. And I think the challenge that you have in a country like Japan, which if you're a foreign leader, is obviously the language complexities on that, right? So I think a lot of times some things that I would say verbally has either been maybe misunderstood or perhaps conveyed in a different meaning. I had a different meaning as to what's been sort of translated to in Japanese. So what I tend to do is when I'm communicating to the business, particularly if I'm communicating on strategy or expectations or promises, I'll always make sure I follow that up with an email to those people as well, just to make sure that nothing was sort of misunderstood or translated incorrectly or whatnot. What I would say is some of the AI tools that you have now, like Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever, makes translating a lot easier than what it would have been in the past. Once upon a time, you'd have to create your content and then send it to a translator and maybe wait a few weeks or whatever, a few days, or a week to get that translation back. Whereas now you can do it yourself in 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's amazing. And what about culture in terms of, you have Hayes culture, global, you have Japanese culture locally, and then you have Grant culture. You run this organization the way you like to run it because you're the boss.
Sure.
So what have you found has been effective to create the right culture that you want to have in the company?
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, you can't go against Hayes culture, you get fired. You can't go against Japanese culture because you'll get nowhere. But still, within those umbrellas, there's still an opportunity for you to mold how things work around here the way you like it. So what have you found is effective to do that?
Sure. I think Grant culture and Hayes culture are pretty intertwined now. Because I've been with the business for 20 years and started off as a graduate, and I'd say our culture has changed quite a lot over that 20-year period, but as a result of that, my approach to culture building has also changed. And I would say if I'm sitting here in another 10 years, the culture probably would have changed again. But I like change. I'm a big proponent of change. I think the concept of Kaizen is good. I think you could always be better at something, but if you're doing something that's irrelevant or not right, well, the last thing you want to be doing is getting better at that. So I think change management and a mindset, a positive mindset towards change management is hugely important. As a result of that, I think my culture and Hayes culture has generally been pretty much aligned along the way. But yes, to answer your question, I think Hayes has been in Japan now for almost 25 years. We acquired a business actually to enter into the Japan market back in 2001, I think it was. So when I came into the Japan business, there wasn't a lot of alteration that needed to be done to align the Japan business to the international business. But one thing that we have done in the last 5 years is growing our sort of Nikkei presence. So up until probably 5 years ago, we were an international recruitment company that was very much focused on the Gaishi market. And therefore, the people that we would hire into our business would first and foremost would be English speakers. We definitely hired Japanese people, but they were usually bilinguals and whatnot. Many of them had spent time living in the US or Australia or wherever. But our strategy has changed somewhat, and we have put investment into being able to deliver a better service to our Nikkei customers. And as a result of that, we have hired Japanese nationals who perhaps don't speak any English at all. So then the question around sort of culture building becomes more relevant at that point. And you're right, there is, someone like myself, I'm kind of the conduit between what head office is saying and the concepts that are being created as far as culture goes there, and how are we going to embed that into a business in Japan that no longer is only English speaking, is Japanese as well. And that is a challenge. It continues to be a challenge. I think one thing that you as a leader need to be really conscious of is you got to keep that message consistent coming from group. You can't have, okay, this is what we're doing globally, and then suddenly it changes to your point earlier. But I think you have to dissect that message a little bit and go, well, what is not relevant to Japan? I mean, even some of the meanings of words. We have valued behaviors which we live by in our business. And sometimes the meanings of those values is not translated into what you think it means in Japan. It could have negative impact if you don't really know what you're doing in terms of translating those sorts of things. So we always take global messaging, global behaviors, global values, and we look at it and we might modify it slightly, but the reason we're modifying it is because we do want it to be the same. We want it to be relevant to the Japan culture and the Japan business. So it's a challenge, and it's always something that that you have to be constantly looking at. And it's two-way. It's sort of a symbiotic relationship, because we have to take the messaging from group, put it into the Japan business, but then also be able to go back and say, this is what changes we've made and this is why we've made the changes, and so on. So it's a constant thing.
What about if someone called you up and said, Grant, I'm being transferred to Japan to run our organization here. I don't speak Japanese, I don't know Japan, but you've been there forever. Well, give me some advice, Grant. What can I do to be an effective leader in Japan? What advice would you give them?
Sure. First thing I'd say is do it. I think sometimes when we're thinking about moving to really foreign places like Japan, you can spend a lot of time talking yourself out of doing it. So I think just throw yourself into it. I've been fortunate, as I mentioned, my wife is half Japanese, and she does speak the language fluently, and that has been an incredible help. But I also know many people that have lived in Japan for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Even today, they don't speak the language. Now, I would certainly suggest that if you're going to live here, you invest some time into understanding the basics of the language and the culture, of course. But my point is that there are people that have just thrown themselves into the country and have done well and continue to live here quite happily. From a leadership perspective and a business perspective, I think the probably the three bigger pieces of advice I have is just be aware of that high context, sort of less explicit communication style. I think you have to listen a lot more to the people around you, the people in your business. Spend a lot of time getting to know your business, listening to people before acting. I think the second thing,
just on that listening to people, I think one of the mistakes that some leaders make is they come here, they look around, they go, this looks wrong. This is not how we do it. This seems a bit strange. I should change that. And then people resist. So they start, well, I got to get rid of these people.
yeah,
Good for your business maybe. So these people are out. But in fact, if they'd spent time listening to the clients, then they may realize, oh, that's why we do it like, oh, okay. Well, that's important from a client point of view. Well, that's why so-and-so's so stridently resisting me, because so-and-so's representing the client's interests and pushing back. And it's not against me, it's supporting the client. That listening shouldn't just be internal, I think. As soon as you get out of the inside of the company to the client base, a lot of insights, I think, pop out.
Yeah, and it's management 101, isn't it? If you're going into a new business, spend the first 90 days getting to know the people that work for you, getting to know your customers, getting to know your markets before you go in there and start executing on any change. It's a bit like pulling out, you're renovating your house and you see some sort of light switch component. You don't really know what it does, so you just rip it out. And the next thing you know, none of the lights switch on. So it's a little bit like that. But yeah, I think, particularly, I think I think the threat is much bigger when you're transferring within your own company as well, because you become so ingrained in what works in your company in different markets. You could do yourself real damage by tinkering around with the structure and the setup and the people before you actually know why is that in place. Generally speaking, in my experience, things that look a little bit strange, they're actually there for a reason. Now, you could always improve that. And as I mentioned, I'm a big fan of change management. But I think one of the key caveats to change management is the sort of understanding and preparation phase, which comes at the very start, where you've got a really clear understanding about our current state, why it is like that, where we want to get to. So yeah, I think listening is definitely one of the biggest pieces of advice that I would get. Now, if you don't speak Japanese and people that you're listening to don't speak English, you're going to have to find ways around that. But as I mentioned, there are tools and even people, that can help with that translation. The second thing I would say is just make sure that your communication is really clear. Again, you're operating in a, generally speaking, in an environment that is high context. And I think you just want to make sure that the messaging that you're getting across, your vision, your expectations in particular, there is no ambiguity. It's very clear what you're asking. The outcomes are really well understood.
Maybe avoid sporting idioms.
Well, I think
The cultural idioms, Australians particularly, we're notorious for our languages full of idioms.
idioms, slang.
Incomprehensible to foreigners. Like, what's he talking about?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I mean, it just stuff. I think phrases that I wouldn't even thought was slang. It's because it's so ingrained in the lexicon in Australia that I'll give you an example. When I first came to Japan, and this is not even to Japanese people, I mean, this would be to Americans and anyone really. I'd go who's not Australian. I'd go up to them and say, "Listen, I know you're flat out, but I just wanted to grab you for a moment." And they wouldn't say it to me, but then I found out later they'll always say, "What is?"
She's mean about flat out.
So yeah, you have to be, and then if, as you mentioned, if you're embedding those types of phrases into your expectation setting, you can cause quite a lot of confusion without really realizing it.
Here's a translation for our viewers. Flat out in Australia means you're super busy. You're just going for it, full on busy, and I'm going to interrupt you.
Well, I think from what I heard, it originally comes from the phrase flat out like a lizard drinking, because the frill-necked lizards, when they drink water, they flatten themselves, and they usually do that after they're running. They run through the desert a million miles an hour, find water, flatten themselves out to drink, and that's where the phrase "you're busy, you're flat out." so that's one that actually, in the end, someone actually said to me, "We don't know what you mean when you say you're flat out. We're flat out." So that was a good eye opener for me.
And you can imagine if you're Japanese, right? Like, you're like, no chance. Like, what is he talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Out.
And then the third bit of advice I'd say is, I've touched on this before, but create a culture where change is celebrated. It's something that you should really, everyone should have that sort of change mindset. I think, as I mentioned, there is that Kaizen mentality in Japan, and Japan does continuous improvement probably better than anyone. I mean, you look at Toyota, for example. It was the greatest car company in the world, went over to the States and put all the great American car companies to shame. And that really embeds to that concept of, back then it was Toyota production system, which is now the Lean Six Sigma sort of, how do you make change and reduce waste at the same time? And I think that mentality is really powerful in Japan. But as I said, that is different to change management. You could be focused on getting really good and improving things that you shouldn't be doing, right? And I think we have changed our organization in Japan a lot in the last 5 years. We've changed the structure, we've changed our strategy, and it was difficult at the start. And I think one of the things that I'm probably most happy about when I look at the business now is there really is a different approach to change management. It's not something that's feared anymore. It's something that's kind of celebrated. And as they say, the only constant in life really is change. And if I look at this organization in 10 years, it will look completely different to what it looks like now. And one of the things that makes that journey a lot more difficult is if you don't have the people behind you who feel the same way about change management. But you can change that culture. And I think coming into a business and talking about the benefits of change and making change less painful than what it needs to be will set a foundation, I think, that will help you to take your organization 3, 5, 10 years into the future.
What about with change? When it's an irony that you ask people to change, come out of your comfort zone, do something different, new. And of course, within that, there's always a possibility of failure or error. Won't be done as perfectly as something you're very used to doing. But how that is handled, because you have this irony of people ask for change, people struggle to make the change, and then they beat them up for not being perfect in making a change from 0 to 100 straight away. So you've got to have a counterbalance there of how you deal with people's ability to not be able to change perfectly. What have you found works well to overcome that issue?
Yeah, it is. It's a bit funny, isn't it? It's almost like the request is please change as long as it's successful. And as we know,
and please be perfect in the change.
Yeah, and that's not always the case. But look, I think if you're gonna create an environment where change is not feared and innovation thrives, as a leader, you have to be explicit around that, creating that culture. So again, it comes down to kind of communication. I think, as you know, particularly in a culture like the Japanese culture, I think there is sometimes there's less of a desire to do something that's going to make you stand out, and even if that's for good reasons. And I think some of that might feed into I just want to do the status quo. I just want to be doing the same thing that I know has worked and that all my colleagues are doing, and I don't want to be the one that stands out, even if I create something that's great. That I don't want that. I don't want that tension. But the risk of that is that you stifle innovation, for instance, right? So I think as a leader, you have to be quite explicit in promoting the fact that you're almost giving people permission to try something different, right? And letting them know that mistakes will happen. Now, if a mistake happens, you just need to treat that as data and learn from that mistake. If it happens 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, you start asking, well, are we looking at the data that we're getting back from these mistakes, and are we learning from our lessons? But absolutely, if you're going to have an innovative culture where you want to really promote change, you're going to have to just accept the fact that mistakes are going to happen. Some of those mistakes might be costly, and you want to try and reduce those mistakes as much as you possibly can. But any mistake is a learning lesson, and it's just another piece of data that you can reflect on and go, okay, let's do something in a different way. But I also think when something doesn't go well and something fails, don't publicly announce that, or don't make people feel bad. But again, if this is the 8th time that the same mistake has happened, you might pull someone into a room to have the conversation. But
I don't think I would wait to 8.
No, but resist the urge of, I guess in the saying in English is throwing people under the bus, right? Looking for anyone to blame, sort of apart from yourself. But at the same time, I think that when something is created that's new and different and actually works, I think as leaders, we have to celebrate that, and we have to talk about that, and we have to give people the credit that they're owed. I think one of the things that I feel would stop me from wanting to try and improve something or be innovative towards a particular problem would be the fact that I'd get no recognition for it anyway. So what's the point? Because some of these projects and some of these things that you do to make a positive change are not done on company time. For instance, I've spent much of my own personal time looking at problems that we have in our processes, and can we automate things? Can we involve technology to be able to solve that problem? I'm not sitting there between the hours of 9 to 6 working on this. This is something I'm doing in my own personal time. Now, if you are successful with that and the impact is really positive to the business, you would hope that someone turns around and just gives you a bit of recognition, says, well done. You don't need financial rewards and, big parties or anything like that, but just a simple pat on the back and a congratulations, well done. I think goes a long way to creating a culture where people do feel like they can be innovative.
What's your definition of leadership?
I mean, there's many definitions, isn't there? But I think my definition would be a leader is someone who takes a strategy and a vision, helps to then break that down into habits, and empowers people around them to execute on those habits daily to achieve that strategy. Now, there's a lot of facets and factors and they go into that, but I think it really boils down to that, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's good. Well, Grant, thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. Nice to
Great
see you again.
insights today. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.